Dar, I guess this is a little bit of news too, but you want to talk about the passing of Akira Toriyama?
Yes, I think that it's kind of it'd be kind of wrong for me to not talk about it. Um and but I think I've had the benefit of a few days. It happened a couple of days ago. Um so I've been able to think about it, and I also been able to see a bunch of people do like some nice posts and tributes and whatever. Um I don't really want to try and convince anybody about like his importance, which is kind of like self-evident, or his influence, I should say. His influence, which is kind of self-evident, and obviously he's such a big deal in Japan, for multiple things, even if you just look at like video games like Dragon Quest, for decades it was like the biggest games in Japan, like literally gigantic. Um, and a big part of that was just like his art design, character design, and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like for me, Akira Toriyama is definitely Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Uh, and I've talked about this on and off or here and there. You've probably heard parts of these stories, but I kind of want to express me being a second generation like immigrant kid. Um, so like, and actually, Morgana Dagzu could probably relate to certain extents with this, in maybe slightly different ways. But um, having like Spanish speaking parents, I grew up in a Spanish speaking household, and I grew up in Miami. So all the other kids were literally in my same boat. Um, so we had this weird dichotomy that when we go home, we speak Spanish to our parents. But when we go outside and play, we speak English to each other. And that's just the way we did it. Um, and for me, it kind of created like this weird dichotomy where I can't really, especially when I was young, less so now. I never felt I had ownership of like Spanish, even though I could speak it. Um, and I would see certain kids that were like fresh off the boat. Literally, they came off the raft. They still have like the saltwater shark hanging off their spleen. Um,
Jesus.
and, and and like the way they would speak Spanish, like they had this swagger to it. Um, I mean, I have plenty of swagger in English, but I never had that in, as y'all can tell, but I never had that in Spanish, to speak Spanish. To the point where like I think the best way I could describe it is like, you know how most of us code switch for our parents, where if you're with your parents you probably, cuss less, or you might talk about memes less, or you just might be slightly more formal, comfortable but more formal. You won't talk about your, whatever anime character you're thirsting for, or whatever, whatever you see that amongst your friends.
I don't know about you, Dar, but I totally tell my parents about those anime characters I'm thirsting about.
Right.
Obviously.
But we all do a certain amount of code switching for jobs and for our parents. The best way I could describe Spanish is that I didn't have any other code to switch to. All I had was how I spoke to my parents, and I didn't really have a casual way of conversating with my Spanish friends, except emulation of my parents and how they would talk to their friends, or Spanish TV. And I think a lot of us in our position, these so like there's a thing called no sabo kids, which actually, to be clear, I think the no sabo thing is like really toxic. I don't like it at all. But it's basically a criticism of kids who grew up in a Spanish speaking household who don't speak Spanish. They basically never learn Spanish. And no sé means I don't know in Spanish. So like if somebody who speaks English but knows very little Spanish, they might make the mistake of saying no sabo español, which is like it's incorrect grammar in Spanish, but that's where no sabo comes from. It's a criticism, and I think it's toxic. I don't like it. I think people are allowed to have their, like they belong, and they're allowed to have their heritage even if they don't speak the language. Obviously, the language is a huge part of it, and I think, and I wish they did speak it and learn it. Just because you miss a lot. But like people in that position, that I was in a similar position, where you're in the Spanish speaking community, but you don't feel the just the comfort with Spanish, to the point where like if almost feels like you're a poser. You're like a you're a poser to your own heritage. I think a lot of us find things, um, like entertainment that we like from that language. That's kind of one of our kind of gateways into kind of becoming more familiar with ourselves, that part of ourselves. I think it's a lot of music, and for a certain generation, it was probably reggaeton, like a younger generation than me. Reggaeton is probably a huge part for like the like younger millennial, older Gen Z audience. I didn't have that. For me, it was it was Dragon Ball. And sorry, this is my really roundabout way to get to like back to Akira Toriyama, because it's pretty common knowledge now how big like Dragon Ball is in South America, and especially like Mexico. The dub is the Spanish dub is a Mexican dub, and it's seeing Dragon Ball in Spanish and like Dragon Ball was like my life when I was like a kid, right? And Spanish was like the best way to experience that. It just was, um, because I didn't know Japanese, and the closest I could get to it was going to Anime Hurricane, and buying fan subs, really expensive VHS fan subs that had like Goku saying "fuck you," "I'm gonna kill you," and shit like that. I would watch those. I'd be like, "Damn, Dragon Ball Z is so hardcore in Japan. Goku's like cussing." I didn't know like Goku cussed so much. I just didn't understand. That's not.
Oh my god.
I didn't understand that it didn't work that way. So, um, outside of popularity, which is a relatively easy thing to measure because you can watch merchandise, you can watch the influence it has on pop culture. You can watch sales outside of popularity and stuff like that. More specifically, that stays with me with Dragon Ball is the actual like tangible effect and kind of like a psychic buffer it gave like kids of my generation in my position kind of connection to Spanish. And I'm not even Mexican, but when you live in Miami, it's like the Hispanic soup. You're with like you're with everybody. It's Puerto Ricans, Cubans, like it's Argentinians, everybody, and like being able to experience like the funnest and most exciting part of my day slash life in Spanish is actually like a I think a big reason why I'm relatively comfortable as a bilingual adult who speaks Spanish. It might not have broken down that way because I'm telling you, I was that kid who I was embarrassed to hear. I was embarrassed when my parents would hear me speak Spanish to like a friend or something. I only speak English to friends for some reason. It was like this weird, like mental block where it's like Spanish wasn't for me. It was just like a survival tactic to speak to my parents. And I really do feel that we found things like Dragon Ball, but I think music was probably the biggest thing. Music is probably the easiest thing that we found, to kind of get that Spanish swagger, that casualness, that that connection with your heritage. And again, I apologize if anybody's listening to this and be like what the fuck? I wanted to hear about Akira Toriyama. Well, like I mean, you could go read a Wikipedia article about Akira Toriyama's like accomplishments, which are extremely valid and like super deep. But I really I didn't want to just pay lip service to like because I've seen so many posts and I'm really not criticizing these posts. I think these posts are wonderful, but there's so many posts that are like, this is when a bunch of kids' life change, and it's a clip of like Goku going Super Saiyan or something, right? I think those posts they're fine, but I think they're disingenuous in some way, because I didn't have to wait for Toonami for him to go Super Saiyan because like literally the first thing I ever looked up on the internet was Dragon Ball Z clips. That's what I was looking for. So I knew about Super Saiyan 3 and shit like that when we were still stuck in like the Frieza saga. So it's like I feel that sometimes there's a lack of a depth and nuance when you talk about like what is actual impact of like this entertainment? You know, it is culture. It is actually like, you know, like these cartoons of naked men screaming and shooting fireballs. This is like culture for a lot of reasons, because we spent a lot of time with it and money on it, and just, you know, drawing it and thinking about it and growing up with it, but also just the kind of connections we made. Um, and I guess I don't know how to end this, so I'm still talking. Um,
Yeah, my experience with Dragon Ball Z is different, but I do think in a few thoughts. One of them is I know that Dragon Ball is also very important to a lot of young black men. I think for not the same reasons you're talking about, but I think also um, as a point of connection, right? For other, for kids and um, in children's book in the children's books world, there's this thing they like to talk about when they're talking about multicultural children's books. They call them windows and doors, right? Or I'm sorry, windows and mirrors, and it's a concept that is like, here's a book about, like, say, a Latino character. So Latino kids reading this book can see themselves in it. It's a mirror. And kids who are not Latino can read this book, and it's a window into kind of learning more about what that experience might be like for some people. And I feel like it's a really when you're talking about the cultural impact of something like this, it's really fascinating because you were able to connect with your Hispanic heritage through something that has absolutely nothing to do with the Hispanics, like Spanish speaking world.
yeah,
But that's like, that's also kind of powerful, like a powerful message about um I don't want to say like, oh, people are the same everywhere. Like that's not really what I'm trying to get at, but there is, the inherent appeal of something kind of transcends the cultural barrier, or the transcends the culture in which it was created in order to expand. And yeah, like you said, it is, the cultural impact is more than the sales and the artistic influence, although that is all there and part of it. There is a very, very real impact on individuals and on the people who are consuming media, to one extent or another. And, again, I also feel like, I was sad to hear Akira Toriyama died. I have not engaged with Dragon Ball Z since I was probably 12. Um, Not for any reason other than it was, it was important to me when it was important to my friends also. And as I grew up, I found other things that matched me more. But I really feel like Dragon Ball Z, and for a whole generation, was an extremely important cultural touchstone, right? And I have to say, like, the amount of tributes I've seen on my social media is like places I wouldn't expect. Like, I follow like this history account on Instagram, and they posted it about Akira Toriyama. I'm like,
yeah.
dude, like, I mean, he's the impact is wide, right? Like, he's a big deal. Um, but I like your story because has I think that it says a lot about what happens when media is consumed and then evolves as it's interpreted and passed on.
It also speaks to because we talk about representation a lot, but like you said, it doesn't really have anything to do with Hispanic culture, any Hispanic culture, but it was available. It speaks to like access and like you know the whole world of fandom that was discovered because it was dubbed. You know, so that's why like the whole like dubs are always bad thing is always just like that's the head scratcher for me, because it's whatever preference you might have, but like it wouldn't the fact that it was dubbed on TV for kids to watch. Um, so you know these kids will, whether they're Hispanic or black, like they find these identities within them.
Yeah. Uh, I also don't know, I don't know how to close this out either. But yeah,
I'll
just
say something real quick.
yeah.
So yeah, my first thought when I heard that he died was he was so young, like
They
still
all
too
are.
young.
Yeah.
Yeah, still had so much work to do. So had so many ideas and things that he probably wanted to do,
He was
and it really
actively
sucks.
working on Dragon Ball.
Daima, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
I follow a lot of manga artists on social media, and you better bet that every single one had something to say about Akira Toriyama. It's funny because the current greats of today all grew up reading Dr. Slump and Dragon Ball and were so inspired by like Akira Toriyama's character designs in Dragon Quest. Everyone in Japan has like a story and like a cultural relationship, like you said, Dar, and connection to Akira Toriyama. So it is it's it's really nuts how much influence and how outreach, I guess I would say, he had. Not just in Japan, though, of course, across the world. It's very sad.
Yeah, he's one of those. I think there's a handful of them, and him, Rumiko Takahashi. Um, I'm trying to think of like.
It's pretty much like if you're talking at a world scale, it's I say Akira Toriyama is probably at the top,
Yeah.
and then Rumiko Takahashi, like you said, Dar.
Sailor Moon is also very very big.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, but yeah, I have trouble thinking of anybody else besides. I mean, especially like Rumiko Takahashi and Akira Toriyama. Like that is worldwide reach.
Yeah, I mean, there are mangaka who have passed recently who, within the anime and manga communities, there has been a lot of talk about, Kazuki Takahashi passed away, Kintaro Miura, everybody was very sad, but it's not, again, the random history account I follow did not bring it up. Again, Toriyama's influence is just, yeah, universal. And yeah, I think the manager from Comicopia told me that he's the one who sent me the text being like, "Holy shit." Um, and I was like, "Wow, that was not on my 2024 bingo card." It was very, very unexpected. Um, I kind of just thought he'd keep going. I mean, it's just you kind of don't think about it until it happens, I
Yeah,
guess.
I was streaming Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and ARG sent me. She was in chat. She's like, "Oh, look at Discord, look at Discord," and I was just like, "It's weird to have my live reactions for that forever, like online." I guess I could delete it, but I don't know why I would delete it. Um, but if anybody's curious, I didn't like flip out, do a backflip, and start crying. I was just like, I was like, what? Like I just read it a couple times. I was like, okay, yeah. It's just for some reason it's not anything I expected, and I guess almost all passings are, but yeah, there was something like immortal about him, or something less immortal and more like constant. Like it just Akira Toriyama was just he just is, and I guess he still is, even though he's gone.
Kudos to him for creating Best Husband Vegeta. I
Yes,
will die on this hill. Vegeta was my tween boyfriend. He continues to be the best. Uh just that's it.
kudos to him for creating launch and Android 18 secret best waifus of the entire anime landscape.
We got Cliff in the chat with a comment. How far his influence had was crazy. I saw multiple soccer teams, sports organizations, celebrities, and different fans alike paying homage. It's very true. I guess a question I would have is like, I expect Dragon Ball Daima to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much made. At least whatever first season or first series of that you could explain it as that. Um, who knows what to do after that? I don't know if they're actively working on him with ideas and stuff, but I don't know if there's any outlines of future, future arcs or whatever.
I wonder what they'll do with Dragon Quest.
Yeah, it's tough because anybody can, or not anybody, but like you could definitely imitate his style. You could definitely draw in his style. He has a very distinct style. That's like,
What is Dragon Quest without Akira Toriyama's monster designs and like character designs too?
yeah.
They go hand in hand. It's crazy. Well, it's not easy, but we will go ahead and move along. Yeah, rest in peace, Akira Toriyama.
Hey, if you like that clip, you can join us every single Saturday where we record our brand new episodes. Follow our channel so you know when we schedule our episodes. Also follow our social media accounts. We are at Manga Mac Podcast. Thanks for watching, and don't be afraid to drop a comment and suggest manga we could read.